Bob Marley has been shot. There was blood everywhere. It looked like it had been sprayed with bullets.
In the shooting of Bob, it's very difficult to separate fact from fiction.
Everybody had a theory. Some said it was the opposition, some said it was the CIA.
Levin charges that the shooting of Bob Marley is part of a plot to destabilize Jamaica.
And if a directive was given, did it come from the highest level?
Why would anybody want to hurt Bob? He was so much as simple as peace. Authorities are still at a loss for who was behind the shooting.
While living in Trenchtown, as a young man, surviving was easy. The only thing you have to really look out for was the police, Because the police could just get you, frame you, you go to prison, and because you come from Trenchtown. Trenchtown's like, from them say, where you from? You say, Trenchtown, you're gone.
First time we met in Trenchtown, Bob was around 17. We don't have no instrument when we start. We just sit down and sing.
Did I remember when we used to sing?
Bob lived in a government yard in Trenchtown when we had the troubles in the 60s, where we had a considerable amount of violence in these inner city communities.
Bob had been rejected by his family. He was totally broke and he had nowhere to live. So Coxsone Dog gave him a place to stay. Coxsone was like a father to Bob, and he gave him a chance to sing. But Coxsone was not going to allow him to play any revolutionary religious music. He was just had to sing the pop songs and get hits. When Bob started out, he was doing simple pop songs like Sugar Sugar and What's New Pussycat. He was just trying to make it in music.
In the early days of his music, it was love songs and all of that. As his music evolved through ska into reggae, he embraced the message of Rasta. Rastafari as a religious and social movement that articulated the feelings of oppressed black people of Jamaica, but hooked in as well to the ideas of African liberation.
Rasta consciousness was about who you are as an African. What is your purpose here as a black man?
They were outcasts, and the police would come down hard on these people. They would trim their hair and beat them up and lock them up for smoking a split.
Rasta was never accepted by the middle class, powers that be, was religion of the poor people. Fighting against Babylon, the system where the few control the many.
Bob saw the contempt the poor were held, and he wanted them to have the courage from his music to continue to fight.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your life.
My father's a white and my mother black. No, them call me half caste or whatever. Well, we don't live on nobody's side. We don't live on the black man's side, nor the white man's side. We live on God's side.
He said to me one day, the man that breed my mother was a white man. So you cannot really put me down as white or as black. So I am here, and I have to bring about unity.
Michael Manley has been Prime Minister since 1972 and says 300 years of slavery and British colonialism have left Jamaica a nation of very few haves and many have-nots.
Jamaica permitted a small, privileged group to really have a very good time in life. And some government had to come along and challenge that oligarchy and begin to try to lay the foundations of an egalitarian society.
The choice for the voters is clear-cut. On one hand, they may choose to continue with Prime Minister Michael Manley's brand of socialism. On the other hand, they may vote for a return to a capitalist system.
In this motorcade is Edward Siaka, leader of the Conservative Opposition Party.
Was it a PLP linking out with communist organizations in this country? And we ask ourselves why.
The country was already facing bankruptcy, and if Manley won the election, he could make Jamaica into a totally socialist state. So I had to fight it.
First roadblock erected by Siaka's Jamaican Labour Party is being dismantled by rival Hugh Small from Michael Manley's People's National Party.
Coming up to the 1976 election, the country was getting more and more into a state of hostility and tension.
In Kingston, the two political parties developed what you call garrisons. Trenchtown was a garrison, Tivoli was a garrison, and there would be a Don that would control the garrisons. So these guys were the baddest gangsters in their area, and everybody had to answer to them.
Where the name Don comes from, Don Corleone, it comes from the mafia.
Spaghetti westerns and gangster movies had a great influence on Jamaica. We gotta thank the US culture for that. You gave us our cowboy culture. We just did a Jamaican version.
I spent 10 years in Jamaica trying to piece together the history of this tribal war.
Kingston was a checkerboard of war zones loyal to one party or the other. The politicians needed the gangsters to get out the vote, and the gangsters needed the politicians for protection from the police and for money and for guns.
In the lead up to the elections, ghetto gangs translated the campaign battle of words into deadly armed showdowns.
When you have political violence, now when I see the youth fighting against the youth for the politicians, then I really feel sick.
Johnny was a statement about what was happening in the ghettos at the time.
Woman knows her head and cry, 'cause her son had been shot down in the street and died.
Rasta, we don't support politics. The politician was doing the right thing. Jamaica would be more than paradise.
By 1976, Marley had a worldwide profile. Everybody knew Rasta, everybody knew reggae, everybody knew Bob. So for Bob to be seen as politically engaged was very important to the two political parties. They courted him, they wanted him. Bob knew there was a lot of danger in pursuing that path.
Bob was very careful to be political neutral. You could not accuse Bob Marley of being either JLP or PNP, but he was political.
Bob Marley and the Feathers Brothers.
I do see Trenchtown Rock as a kind of anthem for young people that asserting their independence of the political system. In a sense, it is the first statement that Bob is making where he's going to walk between the two political parties.
As he grew up, Bob was surrounded by local dons, and they all found a neutral turf at 56 Hope Road. And various times you could go in there and you could find people who, if they had met on the street, might have blown each other away. But Bob's place was known as a neutral spot where everyone could come in peace.
Bob's house was on the same street as the Prime Minister, and I was teasing him about it because his whole image was roots and downtown. I said, "Oh, you're getting posh now," and he was like, "No, I'm bringing the ghetto uptown."
First met Bob at 56 Hope Road, and then I became his attorney, confidant. Bob was a Pied Piper, you could say, and 56 Hope Road was an exciting place to be.
Bob had a recording studio on the back, and that's where they did all of the rehearsals.
It was a center of modern Rastafari-inspired pop culture.
I was living at 56 Hope Road, and that movement of Rastafari, that upsurgence of downtown making its way uptown, had started and was growing rapidly, and the upper middle classes were petrified of it. People would line up in the morning. Everybody needed help with school fees, a job, medicine.
He wanted to help people be independent of the handouts of politicians.
I was a Rasta man. We don't like politicians much. PNP and Labour right. We didn't like that.
At Hope Road, there was a certain tension that existed because of murderous rivals being in the same space at the same time.
We have witnessed a type and scale of violence unique to our history. We have seen children being armed. We have seen innocent people murdered in the streets, which has driven fear into the heart of every decent Jamaican citizen. We will not stand by and allow this sabotage of our country to continue. We are proclaiming a state of public emergency.
In that time, the country was in turmoil. People, and Bob's statements to me were, "Let's do something for free, so everybody can come." So we went to see the Prime Minister and gave him our idea.
Bob Marley concert to be held on Sunday, December 5th. The announcement was made at a press conference held by Marley, his manager Don Taylor, and Arnold Bertram.
I was Minister of State when Bob Marley came to discuss the concert. He wanted to do a benefit concert for the people of Jamaica, to give them an early Christmas present.
None of us interpreted it as a political endorsement. The election had not been announced at that point and was never meant to be in support of Manly or a particular party.
Bob Marley was doing the concert to try and bring back a semblance of peace and unity.
2 weeks following that announcement, Jamaica's Prime Minister Michael Manley called new general elections for December 15th.
When Bob agreed to do the show, there was no election date as soon as Bob agreed. Then the PNP announced the election date to follow the show. So they wrapped their election right around Bob to make it look as though he was performing for them.
That made the Smile Jamaica concert appear to be supporting the campaign of the People's National Party.
Michael Manley used Bob Marley's decision for that concert so that it would assist him to get the votes that he knew he was lacking at the time in order to win the election. We wouldn't have used Bob Marley for that purpose because we knew Bob has to be a friend of everybody.
There was a hell of a amount of pressure on Bob Marley not to do the concert. He said there were people from the JLP who were at him daily.
Once Bob announced he was going to do the Smile Jamaica concert, he came under death threats, and he was placed under 24/7 guard by forces of the PNP.
We started getting messages from the opposition. They didn't want it held at Jamaica House, and they didn't want it held here. They didn't want. And then finally, on the Friday, December 3rd, I got a message saying that they didn't want the concert. Period.
One morning I woke up very early and I looked out of the window. I saw Bob and these three men around him. There was a menacing aura to it, and Bob was sort of defiant and taking a tough stance, but at the same time arguing with the men. These people that would come around the house to shake him down and menace him and bully him. And I remember asking him about it.
Killing is one of the best place, man. Everybody love everybody, but they will kill you too. You love it so much that they kill you. Yeah, man. You love it so much that they will kill you. We love it so much that they will kill you, man. We love you plenty, and we kill you.
Like in the words of your song, you always hurt the one you love, the one you don't get the hurt at all.
I was so naive. When I listened to that tape, it sent a shiver down my spine, because Bob is literally saying they're about to try and kill me.
A couple of days before, Bob told us of this vision that he had, where he was at Hope Road and there were like soldiers shooting with guns, and he knew that they came to kill him. But he said somehow they just took him out of it mystically. That's the exact word. They just took him out of the whole thing mystically.
Somehow that night is like, I just have a feeling, you know. It's like, you know, like something in the air or something.
At about 9 p.m., I got to the front gates and they were closed. There was nobody around. It was really dark. As I was walking across, I just got this chill up my spine, like a shudder. And I just had a moment of total fear. And then I had to talk to myself and say, no, there's nothing to be afraid of. The house is full of Rastaman and there's nothing to fear.
Rehearsal, I just stopped and I went in the bedroom with Bob's son, Robbie. He was over 6 years old.
The one shot a man, I got to go and I come through the door and was trying to go in my rehearsal room.
Come on then. Come in and fire a shot, man.
When you expect a shot, just stop. They will continue.
Firing from outside. Windows.
Like lie down on the ground and then run.
Some people couldn't run. They got stuck inside.
We were trapped in this very small room and there was no getting out, but you could tell it was just outside the room. I thought they would just turn around and come in and shoot us. When the shooting stopped, there was just silence. Really eerie, total silence. So we had no way of knowing whether these people were still around, whether everyone was gone. We didn't know. The first sound we heard was Siko, who called out everybody in the house dead.
I said, I'm going out. I'm going to see what's happening. I saw Bob's wife, Rita, come around quickly. She had blood running down all on the side of her head, you know. But I said, what happened to Bob? So I ran up the steps to the kitchen and shouting, Bob! There was this blood on the ground. So I went around the corner and there was Don Taylor lying down, you know, in a pool of blood. And then I saw Bob. He had blood all over him. So I said, are you shot? He said, oh, that's Don Taylor's blood. I saw Bob walking out with the police and he was holding his arm and he was really angry. And they escorted him to their car and they took him away. Don Taylor came in minutes before the gunmen. So when the gunmen came up the steps now and turned to shoot, Don was between them and Bob. So that's why Don got all the shots in his back. What seemed to have happened is Bob turned sideways. So he didn't give a full target to the gunmen. That's why the bullet went this way. And Grace right across his chest, lodged in his arm. He already was forewarned, if you want to say. Maybe because he had a premonition about it, he was quick to react.
Mr. Taylor is said to be in a critical position, while the condition of Rita is not yet known.
Why? I just cannot conceive that anybody would want to hurt Bob, because he was so much a symbol of peace and so much the hope of the island.
On the day of Bob's shooting, a crew from America that had been hired to film the Smile Jamaica concert arrived on the island.
I was part of that group. It's going to be fun. We're shooting a concert, and it's Bob Marley. What could go wrong? And we get to the hotel, and we find out that Bob Marley's been shot.
We all jumped into a car to head over to Hope Road. We got there just as Rita was being put into a car and taken to the hospital. Blood everywhere. It looked like it had been sprayed with bullets.
In the aftermath, everybody had a theory. Some said it was the opposition, some said it was the CIA, some said it was to do with some jockey, doping, abduction, God knows what.
All of the immediate theories that had to do with gambling debts and gangsters. Bob Marley's best friend was the great Jamaican soccer player, Skill Cole. And he was accused of fixing a horse race and burning some people for a huge amount of money. And he fled the country.
And that guys and people around us were involved with the racehorse business, but Bob wasn't a racehorse man. Bob was all about his music.
It was said that Bob was paying off Skill Cole's debts, but that he had missed a payment, and that was the reason for the shooting. But if you killed Bob, then you're never going to get your money. Another theory was that in the days prior to the shooting, Bob was being guarded by people from the PNP, and on the night of the assassination attempt, they just disappeared from their posts and left the home unguarded.
Protective forces were assigned to be at the rehearsals at night. Every night, every fucking night in the rehearsal, except that night. Why didn't they show up for that night? They showed up after the shooting.
Were the PNP complicit in the assassination attempt?
politics, sometimes a political party or faction will do something against themselves to make it look as though the other side did it.
It wasn't us.
So the JLP had absolutely nothing to do with this?
No, we were as surprised as anyone. And we were glad that Bob wasn't really seriously injured.
In spite of the denial by Seaga, suspicions would linger about the JLP.
Don was in critical condition. It looked like Rita had only been grazed in the head, but it was a head wound. Bob had been treated and released.
In an interview at the hospital, Bob Marley said he received numerous threats since the announcement of the Smile Jamaica concert.
You had any threats before? Yeah. You know where these threats have come from? Well, I don't feel I want to talk about that right now.
At the hospital, it was suggested that Bob could go up to Strawberry Hill, as that was fairly secluded.
Jeff said, let's go up to Strawberry Hill and see Bob. I didn't want that to come as a surprise, so on the way up to Strawberry Hill, I decided to tell Jeff and a couple of the band members that my dad was head of the CIA.
Now, that was an interesting revelation to all of us.
Turned out the band members were the sons of ministers in the Jamaican government. And then I realized that we're all brothers in this generation. We don't want the old world anymore. We're struggling to get rid of the oppression, and that was the greatest appeal that Bob had. We came into the property, and a couple of Bob's guards jumped out of the trees carrying machetes. It was a tense atmosphere, and he had been wounded, and he was moving very slowly, as if he was exhausted, like he was carrying this enormous burden.
The elder bosses were telling him that this was a sign from Babylon and that to perform was too dangerous and risky.
Bob did not want to do the concert because he knew the 80,000 people there, anybody in the crowd can just come up and kill him.
We were just chilling up there. He had time to think, thought process, let's do the show or not.
There was a council meeting up at Strawberry Hill. There were maybe 50 people there. Rasta elders, Bob's wife and the family, all the people were against him going.
Rita Marley was the leader of the pack that didn't want him to perform.
Rita had not so long come from the hospital, so she had a head bandage, she had a scarf, but the bandage was under the scarf.
I really felt I had no choice but to get up and say, Bob, if you don't play the concert, you people who shot you will accomplish what they set out to do. And Bob looked at me and said, there's no way I'm going on stage without a machine gun. And I said, well, Bob, your guitar is your machine gun.
5 hours after the concert was due to begin, the star, Bob Marley, is still not there.
He's taking Rita's concerns for his safety into mind. But he's looking down across the hills, and he can see the smoke and the dust rising from All Heroes Park.
And then the chief of police and the minister of defense came up to assure Bob that if he played, it would be safe.
That stage, we don't know where the shooting is coming from, but we PMP as well as the JP. So the fact that a politician is there, where the police has got, don't make me feel too good about Bob leaving with them at all.
Here was this tired man, been shot at, bullet lodged in his arm, and you can tell he's made a decision.
Music got to play. You can't stop music, man. When good music got play, you don't feel no pain.
We were struck by the fact that there were people lining the road most of the way down.
The atmosphere felt like almost mayhem when you got there.
It grew from 5,000 to 90,000 people over the course of the day. So the park was a sea of people. When they realized Bob was there, the noise was unbelievable.
That night was a dangerous night, man. Nobody wanted to go on stage, but you have to go.
He got up and told the people that this concert is not supposed to be political in any way, shape, or form, but he wanted to come down and play 1 or 2 songs. He ended up performing for like over an hour.
War is an assertion that an injustice has been done to him personally, and it's part of the history of injustice, and until that stuff is done, there will be war.
Here is Bob recorded 48 hours after the shooting, and he gave one of the greatest concerts of his life.
He even showed them, bared his chest and showed them where the bullet grazed him.
Proud man bearing the wounds of his battle, showing the crowd hazy. Shot after me and can't, I don't kill him.
He was even more of a hero now. He had survived this gun onslaught, and here he was to tell the tale. I think it even gave him a new status.
After the shooting, Bob didn't feel comfortable in Jamaica.
Bob said, fuck Jamaica. No more Jamaica. We're going to tour the world and spread the good love to the people of the world.
He was heartbroken. He could not believe that anybody on either side could have been convinced to carry out this heinous act against him.
He felt betrayed, and the morning after the concert, Bob left the island and entered into a self-imposed exile.
When he left Jamaica, the air went out of the country. And he was not only leaving them, but leaving what they felt he had promised them.
A violent political campaign has ended with a fairly orderly election, and the winner was Prime Minister Michael Manley.
Shortly after the concert, Michael Manley was re-elected overwhelmingly, and the JLP doubled down on the violence.
The gang situation only escalated after Bob left.
dire straits, Jamaica turned to the IMF, the global financing organization dominated by the United States. But negotiations did not go well.
There was a huge brain drain in Jamaica. The middle class basically deserted the island. All kinds of absolute essentials to life were almost completely gone.
And as the scarcity in the downtown ghettos worsened, there was more and more violence.
The violence made it impossible for Bob to return to the country.
仕事探しはいいの仕事探しはいいの
堂安律の良さっていうものを知らせてもらえるような機会を多く作ってくれてるんで、すごく感謝してます。
仕事探しはいいの
So he wound up spending his time in London. You know, it was more peaceful in London, and Bob also appreciated that the police didn't carry guns.
After the shooting, he realized time was limited and he had a lot of work to do. And so Bob was focused, working on music almost 24/7.
He poured himself into his music. He just poured himself into it. That's what he did to go and lick his wounds.
He was living in exile. Bob made Exodus, Time Magazine's album of the century.
I was lucky enough to be literally living down the road from where they were recording Exodus. The whole Exodus album is very infused with what he'd been through. He would go on to write very specifically about the assassination attempt in songs like Ambush in the Night. In London, it was very much a coming of age of post-colonial, first-generation African immigrants, and Bob was living in their midst.
Bob was in London, mixing with all these different cultures and being exposed to different countries. London kind of opened his mind to more what was going on internationally.
The government of South Africa said today it is sending more of its troops to fight in the Angolan Civil War.
Communists in Angola face violent opposition from capitalists in the US and white South Africans.
Bob Marley is increasingly taking a stand for Africa and the fight for social justice globally.
So arm in arms, with arms, we'll fight this little struggle together. Cause that's the only way we can overcome our little trouble.
It was very clear that Bob was opposed to the political shitstorm, as he called it. Bob said every government on the face of the earth is illegal. Those were fiery words in the 1970s.
You are speaking about the time of the Cold War, when there's no middle ground. The world is divided between two superpowers, and everything you do is scrutinized from the standpoint. Does it suit one or the other?
Viva el magnífico dirigente y primer ministro de Jamaica, compañero Michael Manley.
Fidel and Manley are good friends, and Fidel's relation with Michael Manley became a big issue for the United States.
They don't like what I call them communists, but I hurt them. Their foreign policy is sincere anti-Cuban communists. They are so craving for power, those fascist nincompoops.
The two political parties operated as proxies in a global Cold War.
American support is solidly behind Edward Seaga. On the streets of Kingston, they have their own way of spelling it.
It was sad to speak. That was the CIA who were behind the shoot of Bob Marley. And then the Jamaicans rammed up on the
This was a force to be watched, potential threat to the establishment. CIA, we've got to be looking at him.
The CIA's file on Bob Marley was heavily redacted, but the CIA labeled him as subversive. They were watching him.
We knew that CIA was watching. We felt them. Yeah, we felt them all the time.
The CIA was all over Jamaica. Some of the information that we got was from double agents that we have in the CIA, but also there was cooperation between Cuban intelligence and the KGB. We have information from many sources.
There was tremendous fear in the United States that Jamaica was going to become the next Cuba.
The CIA was bringing the weapons and training people to destabilize the country, even with violent means. The evidence of the change in tactic in the warfare was obvious with the action of the gangs in the street.
There is a lot of evidence that the CIA was facilitating the activities of street fighters rather than the JLP.
These gangs used paramilitary tactics. They would go into the shanty towns and they would seal off whole blocks and with military tactics hold the police and the fire department at bay while they burned down the whole block. And in some cases they would throw children and babies back into the flames. And this of course has served to turn the people against the government of Michael Manley.
Opposition leader Edward Seaga dismisses Philip Agee as a prostitute, selling himself to any government which might have use for his services.
Was the CIA working with the JLP?
I've never spoken with the CIA, man. I really don't know.
At that time, what I heard was that Seaga wouldn't deal directly with any of them. He would deal with his people who would deal with these people. There's no way Seaga dealt directly with CIA or DEA operatives. It was part of his overall plan. America wants to keep Cuba out of the way. We need the help. Come and do it, but don't talk to me. Don't implicate me. I have people you can talk to, but you don't implicate me. The tentacles of the CIA, they reached out and they reached out and they reached out.
Jimmy Cliff, an existential hero as good as anything James Dean or Brando portrayed in the 50s.
I was an established star in Jamaica. And the CIA came to me at my home in Kingston.
and asking me questions like what I think of this one party in Jamaica or that party in Jamaica or that political figure. I said, you can't ask me them kind of question there. You can't ask me a question like that.
Political violence fill your city, yeah. Don't involve Rasta in your say, I'm saying Rasta don't work for no CIA.
Rasta don't work for no CIA. Yeah. Rasta don't work for no CIA. If a poet rise up, or a singer who use words well, rise up, it's a threat to them.
People got afraid of Bob Marley because he had the airwaves. His message was sung by every European picnic, by every American picnic. And there are forces that didn't like it.
By 78, Bob was a superstar. He took me on a tour to Europe. And then I realized this is how they really treat him. I mean, there are police riders in Paris going to the walls of Germany and seeing soldiers put down their arms, seeing people just crying and weeping, seeing people fainting before a concert starts. I mean, people bring their babies and ask him, can you just touch the baby for me?
This was the absolute height of his fame.
We do not defend Marxism nor capitalism. We are strictly Rasta. We independent. We don't have America to go and beg anything, nor Russia to beg anything. We prefer stand up on our own self, which is Rasta, black people rights.
Nothing mattered more to Bob than Jamaica, and he was yearning to go back, but he knew that he couldn't go back home because it was too risky. It was way too dangerous.
Back in Jamaica, the violence reached crisis proportions.
The silver-sanded beaches have been largely deserted by the tourists, for Jamaica's image is that of a violent, disintegrating society. The overstretched police and army patrols have effectively abandoned certain areas to the warring political factions.
The later 1970s were really a moment when hope gave way to despair. There was, for example, the Orange Lane fire, in which an old people's home was set afire, and gunmen shot at the firefighters who tried to put out the flames. There was a level of brutality to the political violence that no one had ever seen before, and it just kept getting worse.
The gun court is the symbol of a nation fed up with crime. Anyone caught on the island with an illegal firearm, or as much as a bullet in his pocket, will be brought here.
1977 was fraught with violence, and Michael Manley decided to put Bucky Marshall and Claudie Mossop, rival gang leaders, in prison.
It was one of those occasions when Claudie was in jail, one of the many occasions.
Claudie was well-known associate of Siaga's JLP, and Bucky was PNP. They would get together and realise how they were being exploited, that they were absolutely pawns of the superpowers.
They declared a truce between them. By the end of the year, Bucky and Claudie were released from prison, and this spontaneous peace truce effort took place.
It was all about unification. That is the reason why they came up with the idea of the One Love concert.
There had to be a coming together, and so there had to be somebody at the centre of that to make it happen. And I think they felt that Bob was the only person who really had that kind of clout.
When Claudie and Bucky went to London and begged him to return to help them quell the violence, Bob really didn't want to go back to Jamaica. He felt it was unsafe because many of the people who had come to kill him were still around. But Bob trusted Claudie.
Bob and Claudie grew up in the same community, and they were boys together. They kept their friendship all along.
Bob's message of peace was so seductive. He was changing people's hearts and minds with music, as he did with somebody like Claudie Mossop. And that was why Bob was such a threat.
It was only because he got the absolute word of both gangsters that he would be safe that he finally returned.
Bob, have you been told what's going to happen when you return to Jamaica?
What's going to happen is that the people must unite. They're going to get a little bit of fight, but they must be strong and unite, because this unity in Jamaica is to unify the universal black people all over the earth.
It was just such an exciting time for everybody in the country, because many of these people had not even spoken to each other for many, many years, and they were all coming together to bring Bob home.
Bob returned to a hero's welcome. The airport was just awash with people.
People jump over the fence and they're on the runway. Massive crowd out there to the gate. And earthquake. So the next day there was a big headlines, Bob Marley returned, and then smaller, earthquake. Jamaica experience of whatever, 3.5.
Bob called me about organizing this concert. The various areas of the concert was a love section, a togetherness section, and a peace section. And so he coined it the One Love Peace Concert. I use different youths from the inner city to do all the security. Whether you're from Tivoli or Jungle, it didn't matter.
I
want to see Bucky Marshall and Claude Marshall for 20 minutes on stage to represent the people. We want to see them. We want to see them.
There was a massive crowd. But what was beautiful about it was you didn't have PNP on this side and JP on that side. They're all mingling.
There was no demarcation. People really wanted this peace thing to work. It was just something phenomenal.
And after a long night of musical fabulousness, at about 2 a.m. Bob came on stage and danced on the stage in a way that no one had ever really seen in Jamaica before. You know, the way he performs abroad, leaping and twirling and tossing his hair, all very dramatic under a big full moon. And then he paused the music.
Could we have up here, on stage here, the presence of Mr. Michael Mann and Mr. Edward Siaga. I just want to shake hands and show the people that we're going to make it right. We're going to unite. We're going to make it right. Because the unite.
I'm telling you, that's a bolt of lightning hit into that stadium when he went into that spiritual dance. And put on the big God himself. That was really looking at the chance, well done.
Bob called up Mr. Edward Siaga first. Then he called up Mr. Michael Mann. It took a little time because I guess he was contemplating, oh, is this a good idea or not? On stage with my arch rival. But he couldn't refuse.
We didn't know that he'd be called upon the stage, or that Manley would have been called upon the stage. Bob was supportive of a mission that was not divisive.
And you could just feel him willing to manifest these people to bring about the peace and stop the bloodshed.
When trying to unite these two parties, Bob knew that he was setting himself as a target, but he was going to risk his own life to come back and unite the people.
And he held their hands aloft in a benediction to Rastafari. The moment was compared to Christ on the cross between the two kingdoms. That was the night Bob went from showman to shaman.
We felt it was the end of tribal war, and that Bob Marley had done a masterpiece, and it was symbolic that everybody wanted peace.
To say that there was suddenly peace all over the land, no. No.
And tried to bring peace, but they couldn't bring no peace.
After the One Love Peace concert, Jim Brown showed up to Bob's place on Hope Road to deliver some of the money from the ticket sales.
Jim Brown was the most powerful Don in the ghetto. His garrison was Tivoli, but was henchman for the whole JLP.
One of my most important informants, Trevor Phillips, was with Bob when Jim Brown showed up. Marley took Trevor aside and said, "Who is this man? What is he doing up here?" And Trevor said to Bob, "But don't you know Jim Brown?" And Bob said, "Trevor, I saw that man up here the night I was shot."
I remember once having a little meeting with some fellas in which Jim Brown was present. And we were in a backroom time. Nobody was supposed to know Jim Brown was here. What he said basically was that when they went into the place and started firing, Bob Marley said, "Don't shoot me, son."
Bob told me when he saw him later on, that was the guy who was there the night of the shooting. I don't know if Jim actually fired the gun, but that was the guy who was there the night of the shooting.
You never saw the gunman? Well, at that time, no.
But you know who did it?
Yeah.
Were they caught?
No, I don't call the police. Just, you know, 19.
I recognize the gunman man who come. He was a laborite man. The one up here, man.
I think that it was Jim Brown who masterminded that shooting because it would have been a way to secure his bona fides with Siaga. It also launched Jim Brown.
Jim Brown went on to form the notorious Shower Posse. The Shower Posse became one of the prime smugglers of cocaine, heroin into North America.
It took the authorities a long time to realize how murderous this man was because he was under the protection of Edward Siaga from the beginning. Bob Marley never knew this, but one of the tragic ironies of the One Love Peace concert was that, as I learned from one of my sources, it's not peace we are dealing with here, it's pieces, meaning firearms. Guns were brought in some of the sound equipment that came in from the United States, and they were later distributed to gang members of the JLP.
For some people, peace doesn't pay. And many of the prime movers of the peace were killed in a very short time thereafter.
Claudia was with two of his brethren, and they're ambushed and shot with their hands up. When all was said and done, his body was taken to the Ministry of Justice, and shots were fired. I suppose to say, mission accomplished. These men were victims of the peace.
Claudia Massip's participation in the downtown truce sealed Massip's fate. Massip became a liability, and so did all of the gang leaders who participated in that truce.
Claudia got killed, Bucky got killed, and everybody eventually got killed off. In politics in Jamaica, they can only control people with violence.
By that time, the politicians were offing their own dons. They would call out the Jamaican police to liquidate anyone who got out of hand. Peace was way too dangerous for the politicians, and they knew it.
We're here to honor one of the foremost statesmen in our hemisphere, and certainly our good friend, my good friend, the Prime Minister Edward Seaga of Jamaica.
It's really like a light goes out, like a big light is gone, and you're never going to see that again in this lifetime.
CIA was working to destabilize Jamaica, and the political war going on pushed him to become the political force we know today as Bob Marley.
One day, I was with Bob at Hope Road, and we heard a knock. When we answered the door, there were two African brothers from Rhodesia. They said they were going to get their independence. They explained to us that when they were losing the battle, Bob's music really gave them so much hope and confidence. It was Bob's music that won the war.
When the Berlin Wall was being torn down, we were playing Bob Marley music. Anytime in a world crisis, they played Bob Marley music. It's a message that's relevant now, even more so than 40 years ago.
Everywhere in the world today, Bob Marley is a symbol of freedom. Wherever widows need solace, wherever freedom fighters need to be convinced of the righteousness of their tasks, they're going to be singing the anthems of Bob Marley.
I know I'm benefit to the people, you know. That's the only consciousness I have of myself, that I can be beneficial to our people.
When I think about how the shooting affected Bob's vision of the world and his hope for the future, I think about the lyrics of Redemption Song and the lines that go, "How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look?" You realize that what Marley is talking about is the entire history of Jamaica. That's both a lament for the past and a kind of hope for the future.
Another song of freedom is all I ever have. Redemption.